So she trains here every day. She'll be doing front 1.5 on the 10 meter. Very nice entry there. You can see her little height towards the platform again. Not gonna get those sevens, but 6.5 is a decent score to start with. A lot of these girls are gonna be shooting for somewhere between the range of 30 and 40 points for the dives. We have Lois from Great Britain and her 1.5 pike from the 7 meter. Very nice dive from Lois. Might be a little past vertical there. You see her legs kind of pointing towards the tower again.
Från Sverige och Jönköping. Erik Bäck, 1,5 volt framåt i pik, 7,5 meter.
Now I have Ellie from Sweden. Hometown is Jönköping, middle of Sweden. She'll be doing front 1.5 from the 7 meter. So I saw Freya, her countryman, do this countrywoman, I should say, from 10 meter. Very nice dive for Ellie. Maybe not quite as clean as she could use. 6.5, solid start for Ellie. You can see there's a little splash there. That really strong rip. Now we have Matilda from Italy. Front 1.5, just like we saw Freya do a little bit earlier. Many of the girls will start with either front 1.5 or inward 1.5. We're talking about that's a little bit easier to start with, as it is a forward entry, meaning you can see the water unfold in front of you, as opposed to the back end, is a little bit more what we call a blind entry. We have Matilda doing a very nice dive here, a little bit short of vertical still, meaning her feet are pointing back towards the platform. You can see she's not quite at 90 degrees. We want to see that really straight line just pointed at the ceiling. Now we have Viola, 1.5. Again, many of our girls will be doing this dive in their first round, so it's not uncommon to see them do similar dives in these first few rounds. Very nice sound on the entry. You can hear that kind of get ripped in half. Viola getting straight sevens, very strong dive. Charlotte from Germany. Front 1.5 from the 10 meter. Very nice. Possibly trying to hit that vertical point. Not quite getting to where she wants to be overall, but still solid 6.5 for her. We have Scarlett. Now this is the arm stand we were talking about. There is a balk judge up there seeing if they move their hands. Scarlett's electing to do a press up here. You might see some of the other girls kick up. If you had watched the girls' platform B, we talked a little bit about choosing to press up versus pike up. The press up is going to give you a little more stability, but it does require a little more technique and strength. And they're shooting to demonstrate to the judges that they have a solid control in this handstand. Scarlett demonstrating that well and above what might be necessary. Get rewarded for that. A really nice entry in there. Should get those 7.5s and 8. Over 40 points for her dive. Most of these girls would like to be over 40 points, hitting that kind of 160 mark. First four dives are what we consider dives. If you've heard us before, we've been talking a lot about these required or compulsory dives. They have a set DD. So from platform, if you add up all of the degrees of difficulties, they can't be more than 7.6. So the girls will want to maximize them. Freya doing a beautiful inward 1.5. You can see she just disappears into the water here, getting those 7.5s, really getting rewarded for that fine entry there. You can see there's barely any splash popping off the water there. That'll be a big score for her and put her average right over that 40 points. Now we've got Lois from Great Britain, back dive pike from 7 meter. Lois actually prefers her backs and reverses, so we saw her start with that inward 1.5, and now she's getting to back dive, which she really likes. And you can see that's a beautiful line there. You can see those great pointed toes. Not quite the entry she might want, but she's still going to get some 7s in there. So it's a solid start for her. 75 points after the first 2. Now we've got Ellie. Inward 1.5. We saw Freya do this from 10 meter. There is a slight difference in the degree of difficulty there, just 1/10 of a degree. So most of the girls will just decide what is an easier dive for them to perform. They're trying to maximize that raw score, meaning do they get 6s, 7s, 8s from the judges. Ellie with a really beautiful entry here, really sharp knife line as she's going in. She's getting some 6.5s there mostly. She's at 72 after her first 2, keeping pace with the leaders so far. Matilda also electing to do an arm stand. We saw Scarlett do this a little bit earlier. Matilda also electing to press up here. You can see there, they both chose to do kind of a split lift here in their press. Some divers will elect to do it in a pike or a tuck shape. It is at the diver's discretion. There is no deduction for kicking up, piking up, living up. Matilda does a fantastic job, just like Scarlett before her. Maybe not quite as clean of an entry, so she's going to be getting those 6.5s. Still 37 points. I can be quite happy with that. Viola, reverse dive. We saw Lois do a back dive. Very similar dives. The reverse, in comparison to the backs, is going to be a forward jumping motion. The back dive, of course, is back and backward spinning. The reverse is forward jumping, but backwards spinning. Very nice. A lot of the divers will be attempting to get as high of a jump as they can off the platform. It requires just your human strength to get you moving. The springboard, in comparison, will give you a little bit of extra oomph given your timing. The platform, however, is a very solid starting position, so you can't necessarily rely on any of the oscillations from the springboard as you might from the springboard. So a lot of these girls are going to try and jump as high and as powerful as they can to create as much height as possible in their initial start. Here we have Charlotte doing inward 1.5 from 10 meter. Very nice. Maybe a little slow on that start there. Looks like she's being very tentative, not trying to over-rotate. She's getting some solid 6.5 scores there, but might not get those huge 8s, 8.5s with a really kind of crisp pike and come out. We've got Scarlett doing back dive. In this A category, most of the dives will be done off of 7 and 10 meter. As the divers become more and more mature, and this being the older age category, they will be attempting to do the majority of their dives off of 10 meter as they get on in their diving careers. The senior event being only 10 meter. The juniors have the ability to dive from 7, 5, and 10. Scarlett with a beautiful back dive. As you can see, there's a lot of height in this jump here. Really solid control here. You see her demonstrating those straight lines as she goes in the water, rewarded with some 7.5s. Scarlett is our current leader after that second round with 83 points. So she happens to be the only diver averaging over 80 points. Now we've got Freya doing reverse dive, similar to what Scarlett was doing, but like I mentioned before with Viola, this is forward jumping, backward spinning. Very nice dive for Freya. Maybe wanting to put her hands on the water a little bit sooner to get that really ripped entry she had in her inward 1.5, but still very solid dive, 6.5. She can be happy with that for her first 3 dives. Lois doing reverse dive, similar to what Freya just did, but at the 7.5 meter. There is no difference in the degree of difficulty between these two dives from 7 and 10, so the girls will elect to do it whatever they think can get them the highest raw score from the judges. And when I mention raw score, I mean the actual 6s and 7s you see on your screen here, or what we'll see here, 7, 7.5 for lowest, very fine dive. The judges scoring for diving is in a 5 judges system, as we have here. They will take away the top and the low score. In Lois's case, they would take away a 7.5 and a 7. She would be left with 3 7s that we call the raw score of 21, 3 7s together. Ellie doing back dive from 7 meter. Very strong, beautiful entry. So as you can see, as Ellie hit that water, she's really pulling her hands to the side, trying to make a big pocket for her body to enter into the water. So there is no backsplash. So you can see it really doesn't splash. And you see those bubbles at the end. That's from the air being compressed to the sides and then coming back up after she enters the water. Ellie getting rewarded with 7.5s, doing a fantastic job keeping pace with our leaders here. Just behind Lois so far with 112, Lois having 115. Matilda doing inward 1.5 from the 10 meter. Inwards, in a similar vein to our reverse dives, they are forward spinning but backwards jumping. Really nice entry by Matilda. As you can see, it's a very powerful jump up here, and she has a lot of time to line this dive up and really work on the entry. As you can see, she gets her hands way before she touches the water and then can really prepare to lift those hands and pull in the water. Now, they are hitting the water at a very high speed as they're diving from the 10 meters. And so there's a lot of force being imparted onto the body. So they have to be very strong in their wrists and their arms. The triceps taking a big brunt as they're pulling themselves in. Now Viola doing back dive. Very, very nice entry for Viola. Might be a little past vertical here as you see her legs slide past, kind of pointing towards the far wall here. Still rewarded with straight 7s here. I think if she's trying to get above those 7s, she would want to increase her jump a little bit more. But very fine lines and a nice pike for her. Here we've got Charlotte doing reverse dive from 10 meter. Okay. And then we have our reverse dive from Charlotte. Like we mentioned, this has the same degree of difficulty as if you were doing from 7. Charlotte doing a very stable dive there. She's not getting the same entry as we might have seen from some of the other girls. They're not getting those scores above 7, her raw scores. We've got Scarlett doing the same dive. She was our leader from the last round, and let's see if she can keep pace. She was above 40 points on average for her dive so far. And she'd like to continue that trend. And the judges will actually start judging the girls as soon as you hear that whistle. So a lot of even their posture can affect their overall score. Scarlett having a beautiful dive as well. And you can see she's got a very straight posture here. Very strong jump, beautiful pike here. Very nice entry, really working to get into the water here. She will continue to be our leader following into the 4th round.
And here it goes, number 7. I mean, 7.
And now we will begin our 4th round. This is the last round of our compulsory dives, those required dives. And as I mentioned, maybe in the boys' competition, if you happen to be watching, generally in an international competition, if there are prelims and finals, these first compulsory dives would follow along into the finals. So they are very important for the juniors to have a solid base as they go into the optional dives. This is the last of the compulsories for Freya. Beautiful entry against the Freya is doing a really good job getting into that water clean today. Maybe wants a little bit of a straighter line as she's going in. You can see there's a little bend in her hips going in. Still getting a very good entry, 6.5 and 7. She can be really proud of those first 4 for her. She's right at 151. That's a fantastic spot. Usually above 140, they're in fighting chance. Above 160, they're definitely going to be leading the pack. Now I've got Lois doing an arm stand. Again, we've seen a couple of these before. And as you see, Lois there maybe doesn't hold that handstand as long as you might want to see to demonstrate full control. You see, as the handstand needs to demonstrate some semblances of a stop to show to the judges that you have full control in your arm stand. She does a pretty good job, but isn't going to get those 7s and 8s that you might have seen from some of the other girls in their handstand. Now we have Ellie, reverse dive pike. Very nice entry from Ellie. She might be sliding a little past verticals. You see her legs kind of want to point back towards the platform. Still going to get some really high scores just based on this entry here because it is so clean. She's getting those 7.5s and 8. Ellie's right up there ahead of her countrywoman Freya at 156. So they are both in good position to continue on to the next 4 rounds. We have Matilde, reverse dive, same as Ellie, but from the 10 meter. Matilda has mentioned in her bio that she really likes art and music. And there was some art to that dive as well. You can see a very beautiful line as she's going in. She might be a little overly arched and a little further away from the platform than you'd want. You do need to generate some distance so as to be safe from the platform. But if you have too much, the judges are going to be able to see that you're far away from the platform and deduct a little bit for that. So she's seeing some 6 and 6.5s there as opposed to those 7s. Viola doing inward 1.5. This is a higher degree of difficulty compared to some of the other dives we might see here, the back and reverse dives. So even with a similar raw score, she might have an overall higher total score by virtue of multiplying that by the degree of difficulty. And that is a beautiful entry. Very nice line for Viola. She should be very happy with this. She should score over 40 points here. 42, and she's at 153. So we actually have a few of these girls above 150. So far, Ellie, Viola, and Freya are all above 150, followed by Matilda and Lois just under at 146. We have Charlotte from Germany. She'll need a larger scoring dive here to get above the 50-point threshold, but she might, with a decent dive here, be around the 140, 145 mark. Again, these girls, very solid in their first 4 so far. We haven't seen any big misses whatsoever. So it'll be really interesting to see what the last 4 rounds end up being. Very, very strong jump there. Maybe a little slow in her mechanics of the motion. So you can see the twist and the flip are a little bit slow here, slow to finish, slow to start. She'll be in the 6, 6.5 range here, maybe some 5.5s as well. She'll just be under 140 going into the last 4 rounds. So she'll need a little help out of her optionals. So hopefully she's got some extra juice in her optionals. We've got our current leader, Scarlett, doing inward 1.5. As you can see, she's over 120 so far for her first 3, so she's been averaging more than 40 points a dive. So if she can get anything over 40, she'll be above the 160 mark that we were saying is a nice benchmark for the juniors to know that they're in a fighting chance for these optional dives. Okay, so she's doing a little extra work there as she has quite a bit of speed here. So she's going to need to activate her abs and her core to stop that dive from going over. So she ends up being a little short of vertical there. Still 42 points. So she's above 160 and is leading the pack as we start our optional dives. We'll now start to see some more spins, some more flips, some more twists in these optional dives as they have no cap on their DD. Like I mentioned, the previous 4 on aggregate can't be more than 7.6, but all of these following 4 can have unlimited degrees of difficulty. Freya with a beautiful front 2.5, very, very smooth, as you can see. This is a very simple dive from her. She has competed this from the 5 meter before, so taking it up to 7 meter just gives her a little bit extra time. She can really try to line that up and put a great entry on it. 6.5 solid scores. She should be happy with that so far. Very solid list for her so far. Now we've got Lois doing inward 2.5 on the 7 meter. Very nice start for Lois. You can see it's a very powerful jump there. Beautiful puck shape. You see she comes out just a hair early there and then tries to roll in. So you can see there's still a bend in her hips there as she's going in the water. Her legs still pointing at the far wall. So she's not quite getting those sixes and 6.5 that you saw from Freya. It does happen to have a slightly higher degree of difficulty than that front 2.5 that Freya did. So she's similar in score to what Freya received, just by virtue of the multiplying that raw score by the DD. Here we've got Ellie doing back 1.5 with 1.5 twists from 5 meter. This is a common dive for many of the juniors to do from 5 meter, as it's a good lead up to do the following progression from 10 meter. A lot of the girls, as they get older and stronger, will do this dive, a back 1.5, plus an extra flip from the 10 meters, which is quite a high DD and will be a really great dive to have in their senior series. Ellie doing a fantastic job here, very solid 6.5s from 5 meter, keeping pace with our leaders. Matilda doing inward 2.5 pike. We saw Lois do this from 7 meter in the tuck position. Matilda's doing it in pike from the 10 meter. Very nice dive for Matilda. There's a little bump in DD here as she goes up to 10 meter and doing it in pike instead of tuck. She's a little farther away from the 10 meter than she needs to be, and so you see kind of her momentum carrying her backward towards that far wall. Makes it a little difficult to put that entry on for her, so she's a little short there, getting rewarded with 5.5s. Viola doing front 2.5 pike. We saw Freya do this a little bit earlier, electing it to do it with a running start. Viola is doing it with a standing start. That does make it a little more stable, but you're generating a little less power as you don't have that running energy, kinetic energy going into your dive. Viola still making it quite easily. Beautiful pike shape. Might be a little short here, so she's not going to get rewarded with those 7s as she's going in, but very nice entry as she's going. 43 points, solid start for a lot of these ladies. We really haven't seen any misses, so it's going to really separate out by either some later misses in the later rounds or the girls that are really demonstrating a lot of pizzazz, we can say, moving on to these final rounds. A lot of electricity, dynamic diving. We've got Charlotte, inward 2.5 pike. We saw a little bit earlier from Matilda. Like I said, there's a little bump in DD if you do it in pike from 10 meter as opposed to tuck from 7 meter, but it's only 1/10. So a lot of these girls will choose the dive that best suits their talent set. Charlotte doing a really good job here. Again, maybe a little further away than she needs to be, so not quite getting that distance bump from the judges. Still 6s, 6.5. She's going to be a solid score moving on. Scarlett doing front 2.5 pike from the 7 meter. Looks like she also is electing to do it standing like Viola did. Again, there's a lot of stability and consistency doing it standing. A lot of divers will actually use this as a drill to practice their come out if they happen to be doing it with a running start from 5 meter. So from a pedagogical standpoint, it's a fantastic dive to be able to do. Scarlett's doing a fantastic job here. Really sharp lines, as you can see her toe point. Lovely pike there, maybe just a little bit past vertical, but still getting rewarded with some 7s here by virtue of the aesthetic flow to her dive. Freya, inward 2.5 tuck. We saw Lois do this a little bit earlier. Like I said, Freya has done both front 2.5 and inward 2.5 on 5 meter. So moving this up to the 7 meter really gives her a chance to have a little extra time to put a fine entry on it. So she'll give herself some space to really see if she can rip this entry there. And so as you can see, she's out a little bit early, really grabbing her hands before she gets to that vertical line. There's a little bit of a hesitancy there, as you can see. So she's not going to get those huge scores, but she's still at the 5.5, 6. Solid, not a big miss. She's still on pace. Lois doing front 3.5 pike from 10 meter. This will be with a running start. And as you can see, these girls, they want to generate as much power as they can, trying to use that momentum to carry them through. Lois doing a very good job. Maybe a little slower spinning than she would have wanted. She'd like to finish that dive a little bit higher. But this dive on 10 meter is a 3.0. So if you see some of the girls doing front 2.5 from 7 meters, that's only a 2.4. So if you can imagine them multiplying that raw score, those 5s, 6s, and 7s all together by 2.4 versus a 3.0, it sometimes can be worth it to do the higher degree of difficulty. We've got Ellie doing reverse 1.5 on 5 meter. Beautiful entry. So as you can see, she's electing to do a little bit of a simpler dive from the 5 meter. But with 7s and 7.5s, she's still getting 44 points here. So even though it might be a little bit lower of a degree of difficulty, that overall total score is going to pay off for her so that she's still keeping pace with the rest of our leaders here. We have Matilda now doing front 2.5 pike from 5 meter. And so we've seen some of these girls do this dive from 7 meter. 5 meter obviously is 2.5 meters lower, so it requires a little bit more explosivity, a little bit more energy to complete these front 2.5 rotations. As we saw Lois do the front 3.5, this is generally a dive that the girls will learn from 5 meter before they go up to 10 meter and try to do the front 3.5. As we can see, Matilda has no problem completing the front 2.5 from 5 meter. She actually has copious amount of times. Might need to line that up a little sooner so that it doesn't feel like she's loose going in the water. Really want to squeeze that core and body tight entering into the water. Especially from the platform, there are such high forces on your body from the gravity as you're hitting the water that it requires a lot of body tension as they enter into the water to avoid both injury risk and to increase the chances of having that rip entry that we're talking about, that low splash. Requires a lot of body tension. Viola, inward 2.5 tuck from 7 meter. Very nice dive by Viola. In fact, she's a little late out there. So as you can see, her feet are kind of passing by that 90-degree vertical line to the water. There's a little bit of hesitancy. You can see her knees don't straighten out immediately as she's letting go of her tuck, which does allow for the dive to continue rotating past that 2.5 mark. Now we've got the Swedish pronunciation from Peder Charlotte. I'm not sure if it's the same in German, but we're going to continue calling her Charlotte so far, the English pronunciation. Forward 3.5 pike, we saw Lois do a little bit earlier. A little bit higher degree of difficulty than some of the other forward spinning dives we've seen so far. Very nice front 3.5 for Charlotte. Maybe a little forward leaning, as you can see her body's in front of the edge of the platform leaving, so she is going to be a little further away from the platform than some of the other divers. 5.5, still a decent score there. Almost 45 or 50 points for Charlotte. Scarlett, inward 2.5 pike on 10 meter. So these inwards dives, they require a lot of technical proficiency, especially from the platform. Springboards, for example, because of the motion of the board, will generate some distance for you by virtue of how the springboard moves. The platform will not, so a lot of this action away from the platform to be a safe distance, to move that head, hips, and body away from the platform requires a lot of ankle, calves, and leg action to generate both distance backwards and upwards. Scarlett doing a good job creating distance backwards, but not quite initiating her somersault. So she's having trouble making around from that 2.5. So she actually has a little bit of a miss there. Those 4s and 4.5s will pull her back down to the rest of the pack. She was our leader for the first 4. After that last dive here, she is just 3 points, or not even 3 points ahead of Ellie and Freya. So we've now got a little bit of a fight and a competition on our hands here. Freya doing reverse 1.5 on 5 meter, similar to what Ellie did. A little bit lower degree of difficulty, but can pay off if well executed here. Beautiful kick out here for Freya. Maybe not as clean of an entry as Ellie had, but still a very, very nice dive for her. Sixes, 6.5s, very solid dive. She should be very pleased with how she's diving. Has had 0 misses so far. Lowest reverse 2.5 on 10 meter. Like we said, Ellie and Freya did reverse 1.5 on 5 meter. A lot of those girls will learn that dive on 5 meter and then add in another flip as they move up to 10 meters. So it's quite common to learn a dive off of 5 meter that is 1 flip less than you might do on 10 meter. So here we're seeing the reverse 2.5. So very similar to what Freya just did, but an extra flip here. And that is a beautiful dive from Lois. That'll actually probably propel her ahead of the other girls. She was in 3rd last round, or 4th in last round, and now she's ahead of Freya, squeezing by some 20 points just by virtue of the high degree of difficulty and well execution there. Now I've got Ellie, front 2.5 on the 7 meter. Very nice entry for Ellie. Fantastic dive. Now, Ellie might not have the most degree of difficulty of all of these girls. We've seen some reverse 2.5s and front 3.5s, but Ellie is performing her dives to perfection so far. Really, really nice entries. 7, 7.5s, no misses for her. Fantastic entries here. She's keeping pace here, right behind Lois. 298 to Lois's 299. So we'll see some fireworks or a fight for sure in that last round of 8. Matilda, back 2.5. Oh, really nice start for Matilda. As you can see, because these backs and reverses are a blind entry, you'll see a lot of times divers can get a little anxious to come out. So you see her trying to kick out a little too early, place her feet towards the water, leaving her well short of vertical. So I don't imagine she'll be really happy with that dive. It's a tough dive there, getting some 2.5s and 3s. That drops her back quite a bit at 258. Now you have Viola doing an arm stand. You saw some of the other girls press up. Now Viola is electing to kick up here. It is a little bit easier, requires a lot less energy than the press up, but can be sometimes a little more unstable because you do have that momentum carrying up. Viola does a great job of demonstrating that handstand position, full control. Very nice kip here. She gets her feet way far down, but then maybe loses her legs a little bit. So she's not going to get rewarded with those 7s and 8s. Still 6, 6.5, solid for her. Now this is our highest degree of difficulty so far in the competition. Charlotte's doing a back 2.5 with 1.5 twists. We saw earlier Ellie doing a back 1.5, 1.5. So I had mentioned that a lot of girls will do that dive on 5 meter first. Charlotte is now electing to do it with an extra flip from the 10 meter. So it's a back 2.5 with 1.5 twists. And this being a 3.2, you're not going to see really, really high raw scores here, as she is a little short of vertical. But as you can see, her overall total score is still a 54, even with 5.5s and 6s. So as you can see, some of the girls that were doing a 2.4, even with 7s, are not beating that 55 point. The degree of difficulty on platform can really play a large role as they move on in their diving careers, making sure that they can increase the dives that they can do, the difficulty of the dives that they can do. Now we've got Scarlett doing a similar type of dive. This is now a front 2.5 with 1 twist. As you saw Charlotte doing a back 1.5, back 2.5 with 1.5 twists. She's now going forward with a full twist. So you're going to see a similar twisting action and then flipping afterwards. So we have a running start here with a full twist and then 2.5 afterward. Very, very nice dive here for Scarlett. Very well executed here. Might be a little short of vertical, 6s. So as you can see, it's a slightly lower degree of difficulty. She's still getting 52 points here. So she's putting pressure on all of the rest of the girls here. Scarlett, with that missed from last round, is now back to the pack. We've got Scarlett, Lois, and Ellie all at almost exactly the same, 300. Charlotte just behind them at 292, and then Viola's a little bit back in fifth place at 282. Freya's not so far behind, 278, and then we have Matilda at 258. It will be really interesting to see what these final dives end up being. I imagine there will be some movement as well, because there's going to be some difference in the degrees of difficulties. So the raw score multiplied by that degree of difficulty can change what the potentials are here. We have Freya doing back 1.5 with 1.5 twists. Or, sorry, back 1.5. Right. Beautiful executed dive by Freya. This is a fantastic list for her. She had 0 misses. She might be lacking a little bit of degree of difficulty compared to the other girls. So you're going to see 320 here for her, or just under 320. Very solid list. She had no holes in that list. Just might need a little more degree of difficulty to really put the pressure on those top 3 girls. Now we've got Lois doing back 2.5 pike. So similar to what Freya was just doing, but again, an extra flip from the 10 meter. And so she's going to have a lot more degree of difficulty. So even if it's similarly executed, she's going to have a higher total score here. So you saw Freya was a little under 40 points there for that dive. This dive, while not as well executed as Freya, will probably end up with a similar score, if not a little bit more here, just because this is a 2.9. Yeah, as you can see, again, close to 40 points, even though she's getting 4s and 4.5s compared to Freya's 6s. So we have Lois, technically our leader right now, 338. But we have Scarlett, Ellie, and Charlotte to come. So we'll see how they end up. We've got Ellie with an inward 2.5, 2.7. So she's looking to get over 40 points here, see if she can get past Lois. Very nice start for her. Little bit of a hesitation on that out. I do believe she'll get over 40 points here, but not much over that. There's a little bit of a roll here on this entry. So she's not getting that really clean entry we've seen from Ellie so far. Those 5.5s, she's going to be close to 42 points. Just past Lois there, maybe 2 points or so. And we've got Matilda, back 2.5 with 1.5 twists. We saw Charlotte from Germany do this a little bit earlier, so it is a very high degree of difficulty, so you can get some really huge scores here. However, Matilda was last after the last round, but she might be able to claw her way back from 7th place. See if she can climb up with a big score here. Very nice dive. She should get a pretty good score here. Maybe not the cleanest of entries we've seen today, but still going to get some decent scores here. 52 points, almost 53. She's above 300, 310. So just behind Freya so far. And now we're going to see how Viola does. Back 1.5, 1.5. We saw Freya do this dive a little bit earlier. We'll see how Viola does. A pretty good entry of the hands. As you can see, the legs are kind of going past vertical here, so you see a little bit of a splash on the back, so she's not going to get above the 6s there. 40 points, 322. Just happens to squeak by Freya there, unfortunately, for the Swedes. But a very solid list for all of these girls so far. No big disasters, which is fantastic for them. We've got Charlotte. This is a back 2.5 on 5 meters, so not as common to compete on the 5 meter, as the girls are learning this dive on the 5 meter to take up to 10 meter and do back 3.5. It's one of the harder dives done by the women today in the international stage, is back 3.5. Really well done by Charlotte. This is not an easy dive to do from 5 meter. She does it superbly. 51 points for her. Very fine last dive. Really technically proficient. She's our current leader at 343, so she squeaks by Ellie there. So our only diver left is Scarlett, and she's going to need about 41 points so far to get past. She's got back 2.5. With a very stable dive, 41 points should be no problem. So as long as we don't see any big misses, um, Scarlett should be our leader. But as we like to say, the competition is never over until the last diver has done their last dive. And that happens to be Scarlett here, who is diving for the gold medal. Beautiful takeoff. Really nice come out. That's going to be very close because that is well short of vertical. So getting over 41 points may be a little challenging here. It is a 2.9. And so she's going to just be short of that 343 that Charlotte had. So Scarlett's going to squeak in between Ellie and Charlotte. And the German diver with a fantastic back 2.5 on 5 meter manages to squeak out that gold medal. Scarlett being in silver medal positioning with 343. Ellie, our Swedish diver, in third place with that bronze medal. Lois just missing out on the podium with 338. Viola 322, and Freya with a solid performance 319. Matilde in seventh place 311. That is and was a fantastic competition. I thought all of the women did a fantastic job. Well, we should say girls because they are still juniors, but we can call them ladies. They were fantastic. Um, some wonderful diving, a lot of variance in the degrees of difficulties and the styles that were chosen. The platform leaves for a lot of individual taste, we should say. Really interesting competition. Congratulations to all the women. Fantastic diving. Congratulations to Charlotte, Scarlett, and Ellie for their medal performances.